As an extremely grateful citizen, I'd like to offer those of you in law enforcement a perspective and humbly challenge you with a call to action. Much like the edge of the rug that I'm standing on, I submit to you that we're collectively standing on the edge of a cultural abyss, a deep and widening gap of mistrust among us versus them. Today, American communities are losing their faith, trust, and confidence in leaders among businesses, civic agencies, the church, government. NPR recently reported survey results indicating a 40-year low of public trust among public institutions. So let's step back from the edge and let's open up the aperture by which we view this problem. I humbly submit to you that our search for the answer is not out there somewhere. It's not about how or what we do what we do. This problem is not tactical, it is not technical, it is not physical in nature. Instead, the nature of this problem is spiritual. By spiritual, I don't mean religious. I mean spiritual in terms of this eternal breath of truth and justice embodied deep within each of us that intrinsically compels us to a greater calling. Our search for this answer is within, and it's centered upon our vocational calling and our personal purpose, regardless of our role throughout the community. This is an arduous task. This is not an easy search. It requires a crucible conversion among each of us. For what's at stake here, I truly believe is significant. What is called for here is a radical reclamation of our communities as sacred ground. So, how do we proceed? How do we attempt to resolve a problem involving both communal and personal reform? How do we solve a problem when both parties, sometimes at the same time, may both be right and wrong? Is it possible that a large national institution revered by American communities can lose its balance only to regain the faith, trust, and confidence once in it? Is it possible that the answer to this question and others could be found written on a simple 3x5 card? I believe I have some insight to share with you. However, it warrants a huge paradigm shift by how some of you may view yourselves, your role within the community at large. The Nacross vignette serves as a great illustration of a paradigm that led to the fall of the Roman Empire. For those of you that may not be aware of it, the Roman Empire, at its zenith, covered some 5 million square miles, 70 million people, 21% of the world's population. The territory was equivalent to some 48 countries according to the 21st century map. In the far outreaches of the Roman Empire, what is now modern-day Germany, Denmark, Belgium, Germanic tribes that were fiercely independent rebelled against Roman rule. From 4 to 8 AD, Augustus Caesar conducted numerous military campaigns to conquer the savages. In 9 AD, he sent a proconsul by the name of Publius Varus to lead a Roman occupation force over the people he had hoped to conquer. To Rome, Varus was an esteemed leader, a strict leader, a strong leader. To the Germanic people, he was a tyrannical leader, known for wanton cruelty, in which he routinely conducted mass crucifixions of the innocents. Varus was stuck in a paradigm of invincibility. His 3 Roman legions, his 3 squadrons of cavalry, auxiliary forces, equivalent to about 36,000 men fighting force, was invincible. He could do anything he wanted. And he failed to see that the community hatred for Varus unified previously independent tribes. They studied Roman tactics, and they waited for an opportunity to defeat this occupation force. That occupation force didn't know it, but they were set up. What happened is that Varus got a call that there was this tribe in the distant part of the forest, territory unknown to the Romans, that was rebelling. Despite warning of the German unification, and despite warning about the route of march, he rushed his forces through the woodline on a thin trail. For 3 days he marched, only to find himself eventually surrounded by those Germanic tribes that had now united. Studied Roman tactics. Those Germanic tribes asymmetrically decimated the Roman force and nearly exterminated it to the man. This was Rome's greatest defeat. Historians regard it as the most decisive battle in military history and a significant turning point in world history. From this moment forward, the Germanic people were liberated, the Roman expansion culminated, and the very survival of Rome itself was at stake. Deep in the woods, watching his fighting force being slaughtered, Varus is known to have been wailing, "Ne cross," meaning not like yesterday. Augustus Caesar, upon learning of the defeat, lost his composure, which was very rare for him. He's known to have banged his head repeatedly against the palace walls, screaming, "Varus, where are my legions?" The takeaway to this is very simple. Varus failed to understand that his old world was gone, that his old world was dead. He failed to continually adapt to the situation at hand. And the message to you is very simple. It's absolutely imperative that each and every one of us in this room learn to accept and thoroughly understand the new world. And the way to do that is to get back to our vocational calling and our personal purpose. I offer the United States Marine Corps example, something I'm very passionate about, familiar with. Here was a national institution, revered by the American people, particularly throughout World War II, that faced political extinction immediately upon the conclusion of World War II. From 1945 to 1947, it had to defend its existence. The Marine Corps leadership at the time was absolutely sage. The way they went about it was brilliant. Instead of explaining tactically or technically what it did and how it did it, it asked a very simple question that could be found on a 3x5 card, which was why? Why does America need a Marine Corps? By asking that piercing question, it forced all Marines to go deep inside and reveal something that was very unique about the Marine Corps to this day, and that is this spiritual mystique that truly defines the ethos, the vocational calling, the spirit of being a Marine. For reasons that transcended cold logic, the answer came back quite simply: America doesn't need a Marine Corps. She wants a Marine Corps. While all of us may not be able to decipher a lie when we hear it, we know the truth when we hear it. And what was truthful is that America wanted a Marine Corps because of what she believed the Marine Corps was about. This unfailing preparedness, this bedrock of character and virtue that served nobly and effectively, decisively, whenever needed, that produced good citizens upon return. Marine leaders grew to understand that the future of the Marine Corps laid within itself. For the individual Marine is the Marine Corps, and the Marine Corps is the individual Marine. Some 20 years later, with the advent of the all-volunteer force, the early 1970s, senior leaders of the Marine Corps had suffered from a paradigm themselves, a patriotic paradigm. They had grown up as young officers in World War II in Korea, and they wrongly thought that everyone wanted to be a Marine and we could make anyone into a Marine. They failed to acknowledge the social and political changes going on in the youth culture of America. And at the inception of the all-volunteer force, we were desperate. We faced a manpower shortage of epic proportion that threatened the demise of the Marine Corps. Out of desperation, we allowed anyone to come in the Marine Corps. Anyone that could walk came into the Marine Corps. And a lot of maladjusted youth graduated from boot camp and went out and killed and maimed other Marines. By 1973, we had horrible problems. The Marine Corps hit rock bottom. The brigs were full. You had to have special permission to put someone in the brig. If you put someone in the brig, you had to make sure someone else was released first. Racial tension that affected our country at large was tearing at the fabric, our esprit de corps of the Marine Corps. By 1975, we had over 18,000 desertions. Less than 50% of the Marines had high school diplomas. 40% of the Marines that came in for recruit training had done drugs within 30 days. And less than 25% were of the upper middle group category. The way that the senior leadership of the Marine Corps went about this under Generals Wilson and Barrow was they regenerated the Marine Corps from within. It took nearly a decade for the Marine Corps to recover from that manpower paradigm that existed back in the early 70s. It rebuilt itself from within, one Marine at a time. By 1983, some 92% of high school graduates, by 1983, of those that graduated from recruit training, some 92% had high school diplomas. We were recovering. By the early 90s, we were known to be drug-free. Yet, with the very strong economy and the euphoria waning after Desert Shield, Desert Storm, the Marine Corps faced a recruiting challenge. For 18 months in a row, we failed to make our recruiting mission due to the low propensity to enlist in that strong economy. When General Mundy was in charge, he took a hard look at what was being trained within. He believed that the character development of the individual Marine, determined the future of the Marine Corps. He lengthened recruit training and put in place doctrinally this formal character development, created the core values you may know of honor, courage, and commitment. When General Krulak took over, seeing how hard it was for us to make the mission, he ignored the advice to lower the standard. And instead, he raised it. It gives me chills to this day to think about what he did. He made it more difficult to become a Marine with the recruiting standard and more difficult to become a Marine by lengthening recruit training and introducing this crucible event that tested physical conditioning, teamwork, and esprit de corps. From that moment on, we never missed mission again. For over 100 months, the Marine Corps successfully accomplished its recruiting mission, despite having raised the standards. But General Krulak's wisdom was brilliant. It was all about distinguishing the United States Marine Corps as the elite service. And mothers and fathers throughout America wanted their children to become part of that. Another unique perspective of our role, our paradigm, by how we see ourselves, I think could be found in the 1669 portrait by Rembrandt of the prodigal son, a parable that many of us know well. What I think is very interesting to point out is that at times, each of us are all three characters in that portrait. We have the young son who's come back to his vocational home after rebelling against his father, squandering the inheritance. We have the older son who's been dutifully obedient, that's resentful. He carries a grievance. He's not at home in his vocational calling. And we have the father who models heroic leadership, who has taken both sins, both errors of both of his sons, and he transcends them by his leadership. And by doing so, he takes his home, his community, and he converts it into that of sacred ground. At times, we're each of those three. At times, we're the younger son. At other times, we're the older son. What I am challenging each and every one of us is to strive to always be the father. Three things truly convert us. There's love, there's failure, and there's communal sacrifice. Never underestimate your value. The power of one is significant. For through the one is the hearts of many. I encourage you to embrace your role as a catalyst for organizational excellence. Because when you transform, you will ignite the transformation of that organization. And when your organization is transformed, it may ignite the transformation of an institution that is so critical to us all. I encourage you to embrace the idea of free will. I encourage you to never be or promote the role of a victim. I encourage you to understand personal accountability and responsibility. We don't think our way into new ways of acting. We act our way into new ways of thinking. Your call to action is to get back to your vocation. Get back to the spirit of your vocational calling. Understand your purpose. What I encourage you to do is, prior to the next break, take a look at this. We'll be handing you these questions on our version of that 3x5 card. And answer them. For those of you in law enforcement, who do we serve? Who do we protect? And is it true? Veracity, honesty, above all else, is essential. And perhaps most importantly, why? Why do I lead? For those of you that may be community leaders, regardless of your role in the community, why do we need to provide a healthy community for those that protect and serve us? Are we accountable for the protection and service provided? And are we exercising a communal voice that shapes the manner in which we are protected and served? And is it true? Lastly, sit down and write your purpose in the form of a personal creed. I encourage you to frame it, hang it in your office, and reflect on it daily. Your role is essential, absolutely critical in the future of our country. On behalf of Paul Callan, the founder of the Callan Course, I encourage you, lead with noble purpose, honorable aspiration, correctly aligned behavior, and selfless mentorship. Thank you for your service, and please call upon us anytime to serve you. Semper Fi.